The Euthyphro dilemma is a dilemma proposed by Socrates in Plato's dialogue Euthyphro. It's a critique of divine command theory. Divine command theory is an approach to ethics in which our highest moral obligations are constituted by God's commands. Plato's original formulation of the dilemma is a little bit awkward on the modern ear, but you can easily reformulate it for clarity's sake in the following way. Either something is good and then God commands it, or something becomes good when God commands it. The dilemma is supposed to be a critique of divine command theory because both horns of the dilemma, both either or, are supposed to be undesirable for the divine command theorist. The first horn of the dilemma is undesirable because if something is good and then God commands it, then that would mean that things are good entirely independent of God. God acts as sort of a glorified tour guide who directs us to things that are good, but God is actually unnecessary for goodness itself. The second horn of the dilemma is undesirable because if things become good when God commands it, then in principle God could command anything to be good. God could command cruelty to be good, and then we'd be morally obligated to be cruel. God could command child abuse to be good, and then we'd be morally obligated to abuse children. It makes morality entirely arbitrary based on God's whims. But there are 5 or 6 reasons why the Euthyphro dilemma does not bother me, not even a little bit, not even at all. Number 1, no matter how powerful the Euthyphro dilemma appears to be, it didn't stop Plato from believing in the form of the good, which has several properties in common with God, and it didn't stop later Neoplatonic thinkers from believing in God. So if the people who take the argument most seriously don't think it troubles these fundamental beliefs, then I don't think it should trouble mine either. Number 2, I don't actually think the first horn of the dilemma is all that bad. Even if it were the case that morality was somehow separate from God, if goodness was somehow separate from God, God would still be in the best position possible to know what is good and to make judgments about it. God would be the ideal moral reasoner on account of God's impartiality, omniscience, and eternality. So even if we don't need God for goodness, our best access to what goodness is would still be through God. Number 3, I don't think the second horn of the dilemma is all that bad either. Even if it were possible in principle for God to arbitrarily command things to be good, that wouldn't be a reason to think that God is arbitrarily commanding things to be good. Provided God is rational and therefore internally consistent, we would expect consistency of command as well. Number 4, you can split the horns of the dilemma and propose a third option and say that God commands things because God is good. God is the very essence of goodness itself, and God's commands flow from that. This avoids the first horn of the dilemma because goodness is no longer separable from God, and it avoids the second horn of the dilemma because God's commands are no longer arbitrary, but a result of God's goodness. Number 5, the Euthyphro dilemma does not bother me because it's not an argument against God's existence, although sometimes people treat it that way, but rather specifically an argument against divine command theory, and I am not a divine command theorist. I am a moral realist. I do believe that there are objective moral values, as do the majority of philosophers, but I'm a virtue ethicist. I don't think our highest moral obligations are to God's commands. I think our highest moral obligations are to the development of excellent character. And so even if this argument were super strong and there were no counters against it, which I think there are, it wouldn't bother me because it's just not applicable to me and my moral reasoning.